Welcome to Beyond the Fundamentals. It's good to be here. Today we are talking about marriage, divorce, and remarriage. This is just a discussion. And for this discussion, I have brought in our good friend Nick. Welcome aboard. How are you?
Hello.
It's good to see
I'm
you.
good. Yeah, you too.
You look like you've been drug under a tow truck all day.
So I think we said this. I don't know if we said this live or not, but the quality of the videos that I do with you is usually based off of, or can be judged off of my the length of my hair. So I still
Right.
haven't gotten a haircut, right?
Yeah.
Kind of like a Samson thing, I think. But the
Right.
shorter my
Yeah.
hair is, usually the better the video is. The last one we did, I think, was with George, and you know,
So this is probably going to be
so.
terrible.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay. I'm hoping so.
Exactly.
So,
Yeah.
for those who don't know, there is, other than like having thought about this for years and having been asked about it a bunch of times and having been through a few things, we have no prep for this. And I did this on purpose. Because we're talking about marriage, divorce, and remarriage, and it's weird because oftentimes Nick and I will get on the phone and we'll talk to each other about something we want to do a video discussion, and it's like all the best insights come out in that phone conversation, and we have a difficult time regenerating that authenticity and that I don't know, that pioneering. There's a liveliness to it, and when insights come in a flow state, you can't really replicate that elsewhere. And so I could do the video by myself, but I figured I wanted an interlocutor to bounce things off of, and I like the way you think, so I'm hoping that we can have a discussion about this. And so I can give you the premise of this:
Okay.
marriage,
Yeah.
divorce, and
What's on
yeah.
your mind? I'm curious.
So I get asked about this a lot, and typically the question about marriage, divorce, and remarriage comes in a few forms, something like, what's your position on marriage, divorce, and remarriage? Or mainly, sometimes I'll just say divorce and remarriage. What's your position on that, right? And, or they'll say, what are the biblical grounds for divorce? Or
Mm,
what are the biblical justifications for divorce? And then
mm,
sometimes, if somebody's divorced, can they get remarried? And my what's on my mind is this. I I do think we have a problem in America and in the church because a lot of fools are getting divorced, right? So
mm.
it's
Yeah.
indicative of some kind of problem, right? But I don't think that lack of knowing what a person should do is the problem.
Mm. In any of the three, the
Right,
marriage, the divorce, or a
right.
remarriage. Yeah.
In any of those, I don't think the lack of knowledge of what a person should do is the problem. So,
Mm,
I guess a series of questions would flow from this, like, what are we trying to accomplish anyway with marriage in the first place? Like, why do we get married? I was just talking to Paula about this, and she's like, the motivations behind why people get married in the first place is a huge deal. And then, what are the causes of divorce? And so, if the
mm,
question should not be just should people get divorced or not get divorced, because people want divorce about like they want cancer. Nobody gets married wanting divorce. And so, what is it that's like, what's the cause of this happening? And like, what's the root cause? How far down does it go? And then I guess the third thing would be, what could we do to actually achieve the desired outcome?
mm.
Like, well, what is the desired outcome? Is the desired outcome for, let's say, people get married for the right reasons and stay married? Maybe, is that a desired outcome? Is that what we're aiming for? And if that's what we're aiming for, um, how do we do that? How do we
Mm.
bring that to pass?
Hmm.
That makes sense.
Yeah. So I don't. So I haven't said anything really publicly, um, but I don't know. So when I started with, kind of, interacting with Beyond the Fundamentals and I was married,
Yeah.
and about I forget what year it was. I think it was 2022,
It's when
21
you
or
came to visit.
22. Yeah. So I got divorced. Not of my own choosing. Uh I had no intentions of being divorced. But it was kind of just forced on me. Uh and it was the funny how that relates to Beyond the Fundamentals is that I was married into a family that is very, very much a fundamentalist Christian, ideologically possessed family.
And you
Um,
were not, you did not grow up that way.
no, and I didn't grow up in that kind of a paradigm. Um, so I guess this video will be multifaceted just for me because I haven't really spent a lot of time talking about this topic, uh, as I've still been kind of absorbing the whole experience that I had in
Yeah.
my body to a point where I haven't really even made the effort to start articulating through just how I feel about it. And so I think that this video might be you know, a
Oh, it
decent
might have you out of your
opportunity to.
comfort zone a little bit.
Oh, I'm totally out of my comfort zone.
So,
Totally. It's new water for me. I haven't I my body has felt a lot of this.
right,
I
right.
know my body's felt a lot of this. I've had dreams about it and all of that stuff. But I haven't taken the time to actually think through, like really, really think, put words and sensible uh language to what this has felt like and what it's done to me. Like, what are the consequences? What are the results? Like, how does it infer my future? Like one of the things is remarriage. Like, that's something that I've thought very, 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 very loosely about, not deeply or
Very
conscientiously.
intently.
So,
Yeah.
or intently at all. So I don't want to take the whole video to like do that. I want to understand what
Right,
you're
right.
thinking, but just as for the sake of the audience, for the sake of myself, and then for you as well, just know that that's a big thing in the background, from my end of things, that is going to come into play as we're kind of discussing through this. So anyway, I think you bringing this up, that you've kind of brought it up with Paula a few times. And I think the thing that stood out to me when you were speaking the first time was you said that you get people that ask you about this, and
Right,
it
right.
sounded like they ask it of you in a couple different angles, with a couple different f- in a couple different frames, with different intentions, I think, too, because you said that some people will ask you directly, what do you think about X, marriage, divorce, remarriage, and then they will simultaneously ask you, what do you think the Bible has to say about this?
Right,
Like, they
right.
kind of like, almost as if they're approaching you to try and, you know, kind of coerce out of you or draw out of you what they might think is expected of them from, like, God. Do you know, or from, at least from
Yeah, yeah.
Christianity,
Right.
like, I don't want to do this. I better ask Kevin. He probably knows.
So it's pretty
You
common
know,
when somebody is listening to a I don't know, somebody who comments on the Bible. You might call him a preacher, teacher, whatever you want to call him. Like when I listened to Ruckman a lot, I wanted to know what Ruckman thought on things. And, oh, I wonder what Chuck Missler thinks on things. So people who listen to this channel, they probably like, oh, I wonder what he thinks on things. I think Mike Winger has a video out there about marriage, divorce, and remarriage. And I think what the expectation is when people ask the question, they're looking for, if you take the sum total of passages in the Bible that talk about marriage, divorce, and remarriage, how do you interpret them to what we should apply to ourselves today and live by, right? I think that's kind of what they're hoping to get, what my take on that is. So one of the first things I ran into as soon as I started talking to Paula is that I wanted to bring up a slide that has all the little lenses that we want to look through, like the 4 kinds of knowing, the brain hemispheres, the locus of authority. So one of the things that pops out to me right away is this locus of authority issue. Paula has a very internalized locus of authority.
Okay.
You might say that's the idea of the law being written on your heart.
Wow.
People with an internalized locus of authority, it's not that they don't believe the Bible, and it's not that they don't follow it or don't think it's true. It's that they can intuit what is wise or best in a particular situation, and they don't really have a need to justify it with Scripture. Now that's going to come out all sideways to people, and they're going to hear it wrong. I know they are. People with an external locus of authority, they're constantly looking for some kind of authority on what can and cannot be done. Like, I need to see the Scripture for it. I need to see Brother Melms say it. I need to see the official position of the church that I'm in, or something like that. They need something external for whether it should or should not be done. So one of the problems we're going to have right off the bat dealing with this issue is the language gap between people with an internal and with an external locus of authority. Because if I'm having a conversation with somebody and it's private, or if it's a congregation full of internal locus of authority people, I can be a lot more relaxed and speak a lot more directly and not dress it up with a whole bunch of external authority trappings. Whereas if I'm talking to external locus authority, I have to go book, chapter, verse, here's all the reasons, here's the 17 different ways it can be interpreted, and here's why I think these 3 are the top of the 17, that kind of thing. They have to go through all the paces like that. So it'd be a very different kind of thing. So, and then if the external locus of authority people are going to think that the internal locus of authority people are just trying to justify their frivolity or sin or excuse their unbiblical behavior, which is completely not the case. It's one of the most it's one of the most common misunderstandings of an internalized locus of authority.
Yeah, so I would like to expand on that, because I do find myself in certain circles to be somebody who definitely leans more towards an internal locus of authority.
Yes.
But what that means is not that I am the final authority. What it means is that I have what it can mean. This isn't, this isn't exclusive. What it can mean, I think what it's intended to mean, is that external authority mediums like the Bible or stories of the past that you're told as a child, or morals or values that you're taught as a child by your parents or by your society. Those things have kind of conglomerated and been internalized. You see, it's not that I'm, just generating my own rules for the universe and for morality and for what should and shouldn't be done. It's a lot more dynamic and it's a lot more complex than that. It's that the person has, understood through their childhood the law like you said, written on the heart, which was really interesting. I've never thought of that, but they've internalized the law, you know, from observing patterns in the world externally, like,
Mm-hmm.
the boy who cried wolf. If you're told that story, then and you've internalized the moral of the story,
Right.
then because it's internal to you, you have the ability to kind of like bob and weave based on the current circumstances that you're dealing with, and be able to apply and maybe just be a little bit more malleable when you need to apply a principle such as the boy who cried wolf, where you are not going to you know call for support
Yeah.
in a
Yep.
time where you may need to
Great
rely on
phrase.
yourself or something else. So you are the internal locus of authority in that situation, because you've already internalized some, one of the 10 commandments in some way. You've internalized that thing. Now, that's not to say that people who have a quote external locus of authority have not internalized some facets of authority in their decision making. But it's to say that in the given circumstance, that they are very much relying on the static nature of mere biblical propositions to be a locus of authority. And it's like it's not going to work out for you, because the 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 Bible is written, and like what do they call it? Uh um Exhortations in the Bible are written in order that you integrate it with your own circumstances inside you, Christ in you, with
Yep. Yep.
with the intention that when the particular circumstance comes in front of you, you're able to apply the principle of the matter in an effortless way, in a non-works way. It flows out of
Yep.
you,
Yep.
and that's
Yep.
the intention. It's not, if you're just relying on a static proposition to tell you what to do, then you've kind of cut off, yeah, you've cut it off at its legs, where now it's not able to move and adapt to the current complexities of a particular circumstance that you're dealing with. So you won't be able to deal with a a a divorce, or reasons to remarry. You won't be able to deal with that, because as it stands in the Bible, you'll take Paul's take on marriage in First Corinthians 7, I think it is.
Yeah.
Um, you won't be able to, you won't be able to apply that. You'll just take it as at face value, and this is the law. Like, this is the center of the locus of authority. This is it right here,
Right. Right.
and it has no ability to deal with anything that's going on within you, or
Yeah. No
anything that's
concept of
going on.
kairos. No concept of attunement with a novel environment.
Yeah.
Yeah. So many things that are. There's so many things that are different. Like where can I? Let me take this whole lenses thing. I'm gonna make this. See if I can put this up here see if we can both see this. I don't know if you can see that, but I have moral foundations here, this gray area that I'm highlighting right now. And in moral foundations, one of them is sanctity degradation, or what you could also call a divine ethic. So through the lens of moralism, there's that. If you're looking for Bible verses which say do and don't, it's propositionally reductive if we're looking at the 4 kinds of knowing. If that makes sense. So I'm leaving out a lot of stuff here. I might be leaving out a lot of things here. I think one of the biggest issues is egoic attachments, ego attachments, whereas like you said, we tend to embody and enculturate what the society presents to us. One man, one wife, da da da. And we have this, I think people have like a categorical sense of ownership over the other person, like they own them.
Hmm.
And there's, people are probably thinking of 1 Corinthians 7. It's not your body, it's your wife's. It's not her body, it's his, that kind of thing. And I
Right.
get that. But then when something happens, they feel like their identity is disrupted. If something with the person that they feel like they own doesn't go well. And it could be anything. The easiest ones to spot are like little disloyalties. Maybe somebody was disloyal to a great degree, like maybe they did commit adultery. Now, if you have an external locus of authority, you say, "Oh, well, there's a biblical grounds for divorce." But hold on just a second. Is that really what you want to do? I mean, what'd you get married for in the first place? You don't have to get divorced if there's adultery. I think there's
Right.
ego there. There's an egoic, like, you have bruised my concept of how much I own you. And I don't like that.
So something just clicked in me that I just want to throw out there and see what you think about. So when you brought up the example that what's it called? Like adultery is grounds for divorce,
Yeah.
biblically speaking.
Mm-hmm.
One of the first things I did was I noticed that I was trying to think of a biblical example that would be a rebuttal to that. Like I was thinking of Hosea.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, so that was me using the Bible as an external locus of authority in order to address something that I had heard, like so
Yeah.
then what it makes me do is, or what I want you to think about or see what you think about is, do you notice a difference between people who you're dealing with who have an external locus of authority where you use an example from the authority like the Bible,
Mm-hmm.
and then they're only going to fire back at you, or they're going to scan through their biblical index
Yeah, they're going to
and
run the
try and
formula. They're going to check the script.
exactly check the script to try and rebuttal the thing. And then so
Mm-hmm.
do you see that as like a phenomenon that happens a lot?
Very much so. There's simulated
Okay.
thinking.
So so what's interesting about that is the only reason that I was trying to come up with a rebuttal was not because I'm actually beholden to the external authority of the Bible, but because I wanted to come up with an example motivated by my internal locus of authority, which I
Mm-hmm.
think is like a more beholden to the binding power of marriage
Right.
that caused me to find, like, to eisegete, or at least like go to the Bible to try and find the example of the biblical example of a marriage which is maintained in spite of adultery.
Right.
So
Right.
it's actually it's actually an internal locus of authority that is motivating the external locus of authority reference. Does
Yes.
that make
Yes.
sense?
Yeah. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So there's I'm lost for words here.
Well, so I just
Like, I know what I want to
wanted
say, but I can't say it. Go ahead.
it kind of makes me think that yes, there are people who, like, so in my experience, I was dealing with a family that was operating very much radically under an external locus of authority. However, I find that in spite of them referencing constantly and searching for constantly the reference material from that external locus of authority, I still think there was an internal locus of authority, probably moral foundations theory, that was motivating that that kind of constant biblical referencing in order to support whatever actions or thoughts that they wanted to, pursue. So
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
like, it's still like, in you bringing up moral foundations theory, it still feels like if somebody wants, it really kind of grounds out at an internal locus of authority, is what I'm saying.
So
That's what it feels like to me.
I, I think the external locus of authority, it it can only result if you have a strict external locus of authority, like everything must be by the Bible, that kind of thing. What you're going to wind up with is legalism, which is going to wind up with witch hunts. And so instead of using the Bible as this life-giving, joyful affordance into a more abundant life, people wind up weaponizing it against each other because they violated the rules. And it makes me think this, like we just started a series on the Beatitudes, just popped into my head. We just started a series on the Beatitudes, and it kind of makes me think that perhaps blessed are they that are merciful, for they shall obtain mercy. It almost makes me think that mercy, being merciful, is the mediation material that eventually precipitates an internalized locus of authority. Because you can't, like, I know I can kick you out of church because you didn't follow this rule. I know I can divorce you because you didn't follow this rule from our external locus of authority that we follow. However, when I decide to not throw the book at them, not bring down the hammer on them, they realize that they did this thing, but there's a way to recover from it, which can wind up being better than it started.
Okay. I got you. Yeah. So I think what the phrase out of the Sermon on the Mount, to those who are merciful, they shall attain mercy.
Yeah,
I
blessed
think
are the merciful, for they shall obtain mercy.
Right. I think it's the same saying as or the same principle as the procedural goals of like dialectic into dialogos, where it's like if you endeavor to participate with a virtue, you will obtain the virtue. So
or
if you
experience it, I don't know. Obtain is a strong word.
Yeah, so
I don't know if
don't
some
like the word
virtues can be
obtain.
had, like in having mode.
Right. When it came out of my mouth, I didn't like it. But if you participate with the virtue,
Yeah.
you will integrate with it in some way. You will
Yes.
understand
Yes.
it in some way. You will know it in some way. So in order to, so blessed are the merciful, for they shall, what's the word?
Obtain mercy.
Obtain mercy.
Yeah. I mean,
So, but
obtain
I
is
think
a that's
yeah, I
used
mean,
there. Be the
so
recipient of.
right. So that's kind of what it feels like to me, is when Jesus is saying, like, in order to understand or obtain mercy, or to be on the recipient of mercy, you have to participate or exercise mercy.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Like, that's kind of the power of the the virtues, in a sense, where uh, the only way in order to experience them is to participate or flex the muscles and participate with them, or
Right. Yep.
exercise them in a
Mm-hmm.
sense. So
It's almost like you
I
can have reciprocal opening with a virtue. Like
yes, that's exactly right. Yes,
it
yeah,
opens
that's
up to
exactly what I'm
you,
saying.
and you open up to it.
Exactly. And so that's why when you said the Sermon on the Mount video, when you were saying something like, there's fundamentalists fundamentalist churches which have been preaching about charity and just regurgitating Paul's use of the word charity or agape constantly, like, propositionally what charity is, you know, um, that environment that they're in is not there's this sense that you have that you're not actually participating with charity, and you have no sense, these people have no idea what love is. They have no idea. And
Right.
so if you're in a situation, and this is kind of like speaking to the audience a little bit, like if you're in a situation where you have this little whisper or this little voice in or even just a feeling in your body where you're in a church environment and it just doesn't feel like like this is what love is, like this isn't love, it's probably not love. It's probably not charity, because
Right. Right.
that's part of what Jesus, I think, is saying in the Sermon on the Mount is, you know, it's only in the exercise or in the participation of the particular thing that you come to know it or come into reciprocation of it, like you were saying, in a in a reciprocal way. And in programs like FSI, I mean, I can tell you firsthand that I've definitely experienced, uh, something like a virtue in a more participatory way where I could put my finger on it and say, that's love, or that's courage, or that's, grace, for example. However, always under the tension of, because it's coming out in language, that it's also not mercy or courage or grace. It's also not that too, because it's like you were saying in I think the video prior to that, is that when it comes out in a proposition, it so reduces and the actual thing that it can't be mistaken for the actual virtue or the actual thing. So there's always that
Right. Right.
tension there. But that's what I
Whenever
feel like.
something is, yeah. When something is promoted as good, it can be virtue signaled. People can align with it with words without doing the real thing. So
Yes.
let me try another way of saying kind of what I'm feeling here, which I like. You're saying, yeah, I'm really enjoying your comments back to me, and I really appreciate you offering them. Let me put it this way: if I use my external locus of authority, Eloah, where's my Bible? And I go through the Bible and I get all the texts on marriage, divorce, remarriage. Okay. I can look at Deuteronomy 24, Matthew 5, Mark 10, Matthew 19, and 1 Corinthians 7. I can look at all the passages, see what they all say. And there's a limited number of outcomes that we have, okay? And they are, okay, either you could or could not get divorced, external locus of authority speaking, or once you are divorced, you either should or should not get remarried at some point. I mean, so those are really your only options. But what I'm finding is that having an answer to that, no, you should not get remarried, or no, you should not get divorced, like knowing what you should do or should not do, does not help people navigate the problems they are in.
Okay.
So when I'm talking to my brother-in-law, because we both been divorced and all this, and we had some struggles with our previous marriages and all that. Like, we both believed that we should stay married. We both thought that we should. We both believed that we should love our spouse. We believed that we should, all the things. But at the end of the day, it turned out that we did not know how, especially in those situations. And I think that some people might be a little easier to love than others. And also you might find it easier to love at one point in your life than another point in your life. And so people are in these situations, and in the middle of the situation, it's foggy. It's It's really
Yeah.
difficult to see what's going on and what should be done. And people don't have an aim. It's just a really foggy thing. And from the outside, it's easy to point the finger and be like, oh, they shouldn't be arguing and bickering. They shouldn't get
Right.
divorced. From that external perspective, you're not riddled down with the threatened identity, the threatened ego, and all the emotions that are reeling. You're not riddled down with that. It's just like a simple analytical thing of what people should and shouldn't do. But it's not that easy from the inside to see. So you can't see clearly from in the middle of the situation. So I don't think that stating whether or not something is grounds for divorce or not is super helpful to somebody who definitely wants to stay married but just doesn't know how. It's like the how thing. How do we do marriage? And it also could be that the reason some people get divorced might be a pre-existing condition before they got married in the first place. But still we're at the how thing. So I guess causes, why are we getting divorced for real? Like when you ask all the questions, and then how do I do what I want to do? Like I value being in a loving, good, nice, wonderful relationship, but don't know how. So I guess my question is for the church, what can we do to where we actually address the how, not just tell people what? Don't tell them what they should do. Let's tell them how they can do what they think they should.
Yeah, this is kind of hitting me, hitting me kind of hard right now, because what I see you doing is like you said at the beginning of the video, you're trying to get a good solid diagnosis on general issues of marriage, divorce, remarriage. And I think you suggested at the beginning of the video that it was like, I don't think the issue is with the constraints of the prescriptions.
Right.
Right?
Exactly. Yep.
It's not the constraints of, let's just say, the external locus of the Bible. It's not those constraints that are actually the problem, which is why, probably coming to think of it now, there's a plethora of examples of a divorce, a marriage that has adultery, remarriage, and there's different things you could get from the Bible to justify any of them, right? So it's like I think that's really smart and wise to try and have the discussion on, okay, so why are we having so many questions about the constraints or about the rules?
Yeah. What are
Why are we
what are the
not?
positions about the rules? It's like when it comes to basketball, all these fools aren't out there on the court trying to figure out what the rules are. They're trying to play the game better than the other person. So
Right.
and so if we think of it, and it's not like we're playing a game against somebody, but there is a game dynamic to it. How do I play this game of marriage better? How do I do my part better so that we can win? Like in a marriage, when you win, you both win. So how do I do this better so that you win?
Right.
Not just know the rules. And I think, I'm really glad you said it that way, because right now Christianity is all about, what are the rules? What do you think the rules are? What do you think the rules are? And I don't think that ambiguity about what the rules are is the problem.
Right.
You only got 4 options.
Yeah,
that's pretty simple.
I'm seeing it so starkly right now. It's as if like the Bible is outlining for you the dimensions of the basketball court, and telling you basically what you need to do in order to be playing the game of Christianity here.
Right.
And
what you can and can't do.
Right. So why are we spending so much time discussing and analyzing the constraints which make the thing a game to begin with, and you're not focused on the actual tactical analysis of your opponent, or of your own
Yeah,
gameplay,
you
which is
can follow all
probably
the
the
rules
problem,
in basketball and get the ball
and still
stolen
not
from you
win.
every time and miss every shot.
Yes.
You know,
Okay. I
I
see it
know
more.
not to double dribble, I know not to travel, but
Yeah.
I need to work up a skill set on how to
Yeah.
evade a defender while I'm dribbling so that I can get past them and get to the basket. That actually turns out
Okay.
it takes practice, and you need to know a little something more than the rules in order to be able to do
Yeah.
that consistently.
So I'm seeing that analogy that you've been using for a while now. I'm seeing it more clearly, you
Hmm.
know,
Yeah, like if
like
you
when
put it in a
we used
different
to do with
domain, it
sports.
kind of opens up a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So what do I think the problems are? Okay. Well, I can definitely anecdotally speak right now. So the reason why what you said before hit me kind of hard was because I haven't really dealt with the shot to my pride, which
Hmm.
has pierced me i- in a way that says you weren't wise enough to keep your marriage together.
Hmm. Hmm.
Um,
Yeah, I'm not over it either.
however, however, that's definitely a shot to my pride. I want to spend just a couple more seconds on that. That's definitely a shot to my pride, and it's also a shot to my values and my morals too, because did not I didn't value divorce. It wasn't something I wanted.
Right,
And
right.
so it's hard for somebody like me to deal with the fact that I wasn't powerful enough or agentic enough to uh to salvage
Hmm.
or to stop this bad thing from happening.
Yeah,
Now,
exactly. That's a great way to say it. That's exactly the way I feel about it.
it makes me feel inferior, and it makes me feel weak and powerless. Now, however, I do take a little bit of solace in one of the things you mentioned about uh, moral foundations theory with the sanctity and degradation,
Hmm.
which is like the divine ethic. And the divine
Hmm.
ethic for me would have been basically, uh, marriage is sacred. Your vows are deeply, deeply sacred. You said them in front of God, your
Hmm.
soon-to-be spouse, in a congregation of people, and I meant what I said, and I was committed to what I said, and I still am.
Yeah.
However, when you said that about the moral foundations theory, I found myself saying that, or discovering that I had an ethic which actually trumped that divine ethic.
Mm.
And that that value, or that ethic, was freedom, and
Hmm.
freedom of choice. And so it also alleviates the the tyrant the tyrant in me, which, like, if I wanted to keep so if somebody were to ask me, what would you have had to do to keep your marriage intact? My answer would be, I would have had to be manipulative. I would have had to manipulate my wife and lie to her and tell her things that weren't true, and not and about her family, about herself, about
Hmm.
me, about the world, and
Hmm.
everything would have been fine, and I would have gotten what I wanted, which was to keep the marriage intact. I would have had to lie
Hmm.
and manipulate.
Hmm.
Now, that would have
You think that
that
might have just
path.
delayed the inevitable, though? It might have just
I
kept it
don't know.
intact because then you're not married. You're not genuinely. You're not authentic as who you are. You're not
Yeah,
authentic in
no,
the marriage. So you're not
it
really
would have
married anymore.
it would have definitely damaged a lot of things. But if I'm to go along with just the divine ethic of marriage that I have, that marriage is sacred and
Yeah.
final and whatever, then that's what I would have had to do with the resources and the agency that I had at the time. That's what I would have had to pursue in order to accomplish that ethic.
Yeah.
or to accomplish that goal. However, it's relieving to me that there was what I felt was a higher ethic, which was my ex-wife's freedom of choice. And so what I took solace in was, yes, I'm not strong enough or powerful enough to, maintain this marriage or keep it intact, you know, um, if I continue down the 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 line of, oh well, I have to maintain the marriage, because I feel like there are religious people or biblically minded people who may have had a reversed value structure than I had, which
Mm-hmm.
was that the marriage is more sacred than someone's freedom of choice.
Hmm.
Do you see what I'm saying?
Yep.
And
Mm-hmm.
um I would say to myself, in thinking about it in private, that if I really do love her, then I will allow her to make her, you know, I'll allow her to make her own choice in spite of what I want. So the higher value has to be charity, it has to be love, it has to be freedom. Remember, love is the affordance of choice.
Yep.
You know
Yep.
what I'm saying? And so um that that commitment to that value set restores the agency to me, restores the power, uh even though, because at least that's accomplished. Like I've stayed committed to the her whatever her circumstances are, whatever her current feelings are, and whatever she's dealing with, she still has the freedom to choose what she wills. um
So you
you
still,
know
so in the value hierarchy, you were still able to maintain fidelity to whichever one was higher, which
yes.
would be freedom of choice. Now, for some people watching the show might not be able to put the pieces of the puzzle together, but
Hmm.
if love is Paul said, I probably need to show a slide for this because our external locus of authority people need to see passages of scripture for this. Where's my
So I don't
beatitudes?
I don't want to
Yeah.
lose this thread, where I think that there are people who are going to actually reverse the priorities of those values. Do you see what I'm saying? Like, I think that might be I'm trying to highlight an actual problem in the tactics of marriage, divorce, and remarriage, not a problem with the constraints. And I think one of those problems is a reversal of the hierarchy of value, which, I think people would beholden be more committed to the notion of staying married than they would, say, the freedom of choice to, choose on an individual basis.
Yeah. So the value of hierarchies. We're told all kinds of things, like in the book of Colossians, like above all these things, put on charity. Well, if charity is the affordance of choice, that puts it at the top of the hierarchical structure. Now, I'm using an external locus of authority to say this,
Hmm.
but and then love is the fulfilling of the law. The desired end state of the commandment is charity. Above all things, have fervent charity among yourselves. So if love is the affordance of choice, charity, love. If love is the affordance of choice, that would go at the top of the value structure hierarchy, over and above the value to stay married, which doesn't mean that we don't value that. But when it
Right.
comes to one versus the other,
Charity
that one
wins.
is listed very clearly as above all,
Yeah.
put on charity, which is the bond of perfectness. Is that
Yeah, it's right on. So
align with what you're saying?
Yeah. So do you think that that one of the problems is basically a misunderstanding of the priority of those values?
So, yeah, yeah, definitely. I wouldn't even have thought of it that way before you said it that way. And once you say it that way, I would have said it's important to know what your values are and where they align in a hierarchy. I would have said that. But I hadn't
Right.
thought about specifically the value of freedom of choice, because love is the affordance of choice, compared specifically with the value of staying married.
Right. And what I'd highlight, if there's anybody in the audience or anybody anywhere that would sort of, you know, give a rebuttal to that or have an issue with that, the reason why charity is above the quote sanctity of marriage is because the sanctity of marriage itself actually rests on the notion of charity. So,
Right. Yeah,
yeah,
you couldn't have the institution of marriage if it wasn't for charity, first of all. So charity is
exactly.
foundational to marriage. And
Exactly.
marriage would, a good marriage, whatever is good about marriage, you can say it that way, would emerge from charity.
Exactly. So that's how you know it's more fundamental and therefore higher on the hierarchy, the value hierarchy.
Yeah. Um, yeah, I was just looking at that list. I'm trying to think about that in my situation. I don't know if it applies in my situation. I want to get to some more conceptual things though, um, and I think you will resonate with this as well. On the channel, we constantly talk about stages of development,
Hmm.
and we've represented these stages of development in various different ways. We look at
Hmm.
Fowler's stages of faith here. We talk about this book sometimes. Remember, these stages of faith are not dogmatic. They're not dogma or anything. They're just models. They're just models. So whether you're using Fowler or whether you're using spiral dynamics, okay, I have this theory. You know, we tell people like there's probably an age at which you should and shouldn't get married. And this always, the society's Overton window is constantly shifting for when this should be. You know, like
Yeah.
my mother was married at the age of 17. And it wasn't the mean of what was happening at the time, but it wasn't odd either. And then, you know, women previously had been getting married in their teens. Well, then people have different ideas. Well, at least you need to be a legal adult first. And then people will say, well, at least you need to be graduated from high school first. And some people will say, well, at least you need to be out of college first. Or, and this thought occurs to me that when you're younger, you know, if you look at your friends you had when you were, say, in the sixth grade or so, or maybe even when you were in high school, you all kind of seem the same like your peers at the time, but then there's
Yeah.
a very different array of aptitudes into which all these
Uh,
people go. Some people
yeah.
become nuclear physicists,
Yeah.
and
Yeah. Yeah.
some people play video games in their grandma's basement. I mean, and
Yeah.
you don't quite know. And something about me tends to think that if it might be a good idea not to get married until you kind of have a pretty good idea where this person's headed and maybe they've proven themselves a little bit. That could be one thing.
Okay.
So instead of an age, instead of
Mm.
saying an age that you should or shouldn't get married, maybe the metric could be something like, let's make sure these fools are like stage 4 or higher before they get married.
What's their yeah, what's the prognosis on their current trajectory, right?
Yeah.
Something like yeah. Yeah, yeah. You're
So
right
and
because
there's
the
yeah. You could look at this a few different ways. Like if on this chart, dividing up all this stuff is stage 3 and below, and then you start to get into stage 4 starts to lean toward this way of being, right? Well,
Yeah.
if
Yes.
somebody who's completely over here is married to somebody who is completely over here, you're going to
Yeah.
have problems. If somebody who's completely over here is married to somebody else who is completely over here, you're going to have problems.
Mm.
So that that stage 3 component is, they're still in the ego. What I'm finding when I deal with people, like, I'm finding more and more people who are definitely in stage 4 in their 20s. But
Mm-hmm.
fundamentalist Christianity tends to keep people in stage 3 a lot longer than that.
Mm-hmm.
So there's going to be a mismatch of availability. If someone's stage 4 and they're in a fundamentalist church, you might not find somebody else who is. But anyway, I think, and there's a lot of reasons for this, but that every time I see a huge issue, that whole ego transcendence thing, which really doesn't start to clear up a whole lot until that stage 4, stage 5 hop.
Yeah.
It's a huge deal. It's a huge deal. As long as somebody is egoic, dealing egoically, you're never going to be married to a real person. And I think it's going to create a lot of conflict. I don't know. What do you think about this? Having a different set of guidance for when people should get married in the first place.
Mm. You know, it's funny. I'm thinking about, you were saying about people in, churches or at least religious organizations that you've noticed that the ones that are, quote, that Christianity at large is, or fundamentalist Christianity is at large set up in such a way that it entraps people in a stage 3 stage of faith.
Yeah.
And I was thinking about it, like, I feel like a lot of the people that I work with, who know nothing about fundamentalist Christianity, not a thing. They are also, the majority of them, I would say, also are in a stage 3 faith box, and they have, in a lot of ways, I
Yeah, I
think.
see this a lot too. People, like, if you're arguing between a Christian and an agnostic or something like that, both people are stage 3, and that's the
Yeah,
problem. Both of them
yeah,
have the concept of God as being some kind of Hebraic megazeus. They both think of external locuses of authority coming along with religion, and that's their
yeah,
problem. That's why they that's why one accepts it and the other one rejects it, because they're
yeah.
both at the anyway.
It's funny because they also I don't want to say this incorrectly, but it seems like they have similar. If they don't have similar problems in their marriages, they have similar results.
Mhm.
You know what I'm
Mhm.
saying? If
Mhm.
the problems aren't exactly the same, the results are definitely the same.
Mhm.
Um, so that the common denominator there is not the religiosity or whether they're believing the Bible or going to church. The common
Mhm.
denominator is what stage of faith they're in.
Yeah, what stage of
You know?
development they're in. Yeah,
Thank
uh,
you. Thank you.
I
Yeah.
well, no, Fowler does call his book "Stages of Faith," but a lot of Christians think that means something religious and or
Right.
spiritual, and he's using it in terms like Tillich would use it: your connection to the ground of being, not
Yes.
a degree of sanctified Christianity or something like that. So, really, a stage of development. For just throwing that out there so people don't get confused.
So
But
that
yes.
that lends some credence to your question, which is maybe we should start to develop advice or um guidance, which is more along the lines of, not a hard lined, you can't get married till you're 18 or 21, but more along the lines of, well, how's about evaluating what stage of proximal stage of development that you feel like you're in,
Yeah.
you
Somebody in the
know?
comments said maturity, and that's kind of too broad. Like, what are the metrics of maturity? What are the aspects by which you're measuring maturity?
Mm.
So yes, maturity, but not specific enough. One definition of
Yeah.
maturity is somebody who can support themselves and reproduce. Well, you can support yourselves and reproduce and then still go get divorced. I did.
Yeah. Yeah. I it, this is kind of a tricky conversation for me because I feel like I'm simultaneously trying to use all of the little tools that we're kind of developing in the middle of the conversation to kind of analyze my own
Yeah,
experience
it is.
because
It's impossible kind of not to. So Sarah put something in the chat and then deleted it. I don't know if she's going to come back. Maybe she might be fixing a spelling error or something. But basically, what about people who develop into different stages at different rates? And that has been a huge thing that I've been trying to warn people about or advise younger people about before they get married. And I don't think that people have to be in the same stage, because it's almost impossible to always grow together. But I do think it would be helpful if our stage 3 was not antagonistic and rivalrous,
mm,
and so egoic, but that would be higher than stage 3. That'd be a problem. But the problem with one matures and the other does not, I think the issue comes down to expectation. If
mm,
if I got married at stage 3 and had no idea about the stages of development, just had no idea about them, when my spouse starts to change, I'm going to start freaking out. But if I know, hey, we're at stage 3, and when my wife starts going through stage 4, 5, and 6, this is what it's going to look like. Oh, I anticipate that. And
mm,
then same thing, like if I think just education, awareness that there are stages of development throughout adulthood and that the person is going to change, and anticipating that, loving that, welcoming that, realizing that every person's mind is as unexplored as the cosmos, as the night sky, and looking at the person with eager anticipation and curiosity, wanting to explore the cosmos of their mind together as they mature, rather than feeling threatened by it as they change.
mm, hmm.
So, does that make sense? Like an expectational?
Yeah, so in regard to the expectation thing, I think I might be opening a little bit of a can of worms here, but
I
it
love it.
feels like to me that, like, if I think about a smaller, let's take a society, I don't know, 600 years ago. The expectations are a byproduct of the kind of narrative structure that you have internalized, and the you know the more normative, like what's normal, in the normative patterns that you have access to. So for example, like what your parents have done, what your friends' parents have done. And so 600 years ago, um the expectations of a marriage and marriages might have been more successful because the expectations were more clearly defined and clearly anticipated, but also they were much, much more uh scarce.
So
Like the
let me
possibilities were much more scarce.
let me try to say it this way. I think, okay, 600 years ago, when you get there's a lot of linearity in society. So
Hmm.
600 years ago, you're talking purple, red, and blue people marrying purple, red, and blue people,
Hmm. Hmm.
and
Yes.
purple, red, and blue tend to go together. There's
Yes.
there's a lot of overlap there.
Yeah.
And that kind of brings me to maybe an insight here, is that maybe one of the reasons our divorce rate is so high is
Yep.
because we're at this precipice here where we
Yes.
have a lot of blue, orange, and green. And
Yes.
so instead of people getting married here where it tended to
Yeah.
work out pretty well, we have a
Exactly.
lot of we have a lot of blue,
Variable
orange
variation.
people marrying green, orange people.
Yes.
You
It's
see?
exactly where I was going. You finished my thought. You finished the thread of my thought.
because
because
that's where mankind's consciousness level, if I could make a quick little bar across here, mankind's consciousness level used to be down here somewhere. And it's as it's moving up, like if mankind's consciousness level here is here, you're blue, you marry a blue, you're going to be fine. You're going to stay married till you're 100 and you're going to die together. It's going to be wonderful.
Exactly.
But as the consciousness level starts to do this and the Overton window of that consciousness level starts to broaden, there's going to be a lot more mismatched relationships across different consciousness levels.
And not even the mismatched relationship. Additionally to that, and the possibilities that you have access to. You see what I'm saying? It's like you're gonna meet an insurmountable amount more of people throughout your lifetime.
Yeah.
Through the internet or through work or whatever. It's almost too much to comprehend at this point for you to expect that someone would stay in a committed relationship, in the same fashion, in the same patterns that they did 600 years ago.
Right. So it's not that they can't stay in a committed relationship, it's that those patterns, something about the way people relate needs to be adaptive to where we find ourselves now.
Yeah. You see where that whole thought went, with the expectation?
Yeah.
It's like the expectation bandwidth is like it's almost combinatorially explosive is what I'm saying.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying? You know what I mean? It's hard to, like, I'm just trying to think of, somebody, the odds of, or the frequency with which somebody grows up, and they end up marrying somebody who is radically different in terms of their expectations about their experiences, what they have to draw from in terms of marital patterns. And with every divorce that happens, that's another fracturing and another casting away into the well of chaos. It's like it's more variables, that could possibly happen because that solidifying and absolute and final structure of marriage has fractured into two, and now they could end up remarrying, and then that fractures, and it's like you see how all of these patterns happen, and it's almost at a point where the divorce rate is so high that it's almost like an unstoppable force at this point. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, like it's going to reach critical mass at some point where something else is going to have to be made from it.
Yeah.
So if you look at to say this in a different way, if you look back, I remember, Paula and I are watching TV shows that took place back in the 40s, and when the parent was divorced back then, it was like a big deal. I remember when I was a kid, the number of my friends that had divorced parents was like 1 out of 20, rather than like all of them now. And so if you are stage 3 marrying a stage 3, but you're also in a stage 3 in-group or community or society, then everything is all well and adaptive. And the husband goes to work, the wife stays at home, and you have this traditional compatibilism, and all that stuff tends to pan out. Well, now you're in a society, and some of these things are the same back then, but now, we're in a society now where people see it as a risk to marry in a financially asymmetric way. In other words, I don't want to marry somebody who also doesn't make comparable money to what I do, because if it goes south, half of my stuff that I've worked to earn is all going to go to her for the sole reason that she doesn't work. Right. Whereas if she does have a job like me and things go south, the court will see that we're about what for what anyway, and everybody gets to leave with what they came with. So
Right.
it's like this marriage now, it's one way to word it. What is marriage? Well, an official marriage certificate is an invitation for the government to come in and have and decide the disposition of half or maybe all of your assets if things in the relationship go south. That's what it really is. And you're changing that for maybe the couple of benefits that you get, like maybe I get to have a slightly lower tax rate, maybe I get to put them on some insurance and name them as a next of kin if I go to the hospital. What do you get for it? And so I think people are seeing societally that there is a much higher risk to my future capacity for well-being if I get married than there is benefit, depending on what aspects you consider.
Yeah, like you think about the what the risk you're risking the future ability of resources and choice that you may have. You're risking that.
Yeah, you are, and you're putting it in the hands of a government entity who
we're making marriage sound really daft.
and the neck that turns the head of the government entity is the skill level and money pumped into lawyers. And so it's not if you look at marriage that way, it's a horrible situation to get into especially understanding now. When you do a risk analysis in an organization, you're looking at severity, frequency, likelihood, that kind of thing. And if you say, well, the likelihood that I'm going to get divorced, and no matter how young people out there, you get married, the likelihood that you're going to get divorced is about 50% right now. And we'll be different. No, you won't. Okay, it's coming. Bend over and grab your ankles. It's coming. And so that's the likelihood. And so what's the severity? What's the so people are doing this risk analysis, and instead of what's God's plan for my life and I love this person, you can't consider those things anymore because society is involved to such a degree that the risk components outweigh those components as far as their ability to affect you negatively in the future. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I wish man. So I don't know what to do about the remarriage part. I don't know. I honestly, genuinely don't even know what I think about that. I have no idea.
Yeah. So, I grew up in a independent Baptist background, and I had always been taught that if you get divorced and then you get remarried, you're committing adultery. Like, the remarriage is adultery. Doesn't matter why. Doesn't matter how long it's been. Doesn't matter what the circumstances. Do what?
It does, so death is not the death do us.
Oh, no. So I'm talking about divorce. So death would free you up. Yeah.
Okay.
So you got to hire somebody who does wet works. Get out of that one. But divorce, in that mindset, if you were to get remarried after that, it's automatically divorce. It's automatically adultery from that mindset. No ifs, ands, or buts. And when I went to Bible college at the University of Mobile, I remember Dr. Yonts, and I have a lot of respect for Dr. Yonts. To this day, I think very fondly of him. He was a 2-point Calvinist. He was a real.
Can I guess the 2 points?
Yeah, go for
total
it.
Depravity. Total depravity. And not limited atonement. Definitely not. Irresistible grace.
No. It's usually the T and the P that come together.
Perseverance of the saints.
Yep.
Okay.
Because
so I didn't
a lot of Baptists who aren't Calvinists think that those are the ones.
Okay.
He also believed in Augustinian predestination, though. So, I mean, I would call him an inconsistent Calvinist now. His name was Dr. Dale Yance. It makes me want to wonder, like, how he's, wonder what
How
he's
he's
up to
doing?
these days. Oh,
Okay.
no. That's not good. He,
Oh no. Is he not with
must have,
us?
it looks like he passed away in 2020. That's terrible.
Oh man.
Anyway, um, he was great, and I remember him teaching the class. He was teaching First Corinthians, and it was a master's level course. And we were talking about, when you get divorced, and I'm like, I'm full-fledged fundamentalist at this point. If you get remarried after you get divorced, you are committing adultery. And he was talking about it from a pastoral standpoint, and he had a way of getting you to feel where he's coming from without having to levy a whole bunch of arguments for it.
Okay.
And so he just simply said, he's like, some people he asked me, what do you think about divorce, Dr. Yance? And his answer, he's like writing something on the board, and he's a little older, so he turned around and looked, and he goes, well, my feeling about divorce is that it happens. Like, there's something about that's just the perfect answer, because that's right. Yeah. We're wanting to elevate some kind of moralistic platitude over and above the reality that we live in, and his answer was simply that it happens. And then when we were discussing options for after divorce, he's like, well, you could stay unmarried, or you could, and he said, no, and remarriage is an option. And I'm like, well, what about? And I don't ever remember getting into it wasn't like an argument or a debate or anything like that, but the remarriage is an option. The way he says this is now for the external locus of authority people, somewhere in 1 Corinthians chapter 7, it says, and if thou be loosed from a wife, art thou loosed from a wife, seek not a wife, and if thou marry, thou hast not sinned, in verses 27 and 28. So it's like you get like a little updated thing from the time of Jesus talking to the Jews by the time that Paul is talking to the Gentiles. Is the external locus of authority kind of thing. But I had never considered that. And so I kind of maintained my own views that I had for a couple of years after I heard that. But then I remembered that to the intent that it started resonating with me. Just hearing him say those simple phrases started resonating with me. The more I thought about life, the more I thought about Scripture, the more I thought about how it's applied. And I think what was happening, my locus of authority was internalizing, and I just didn't have a word for that.
Nice.
And then by the time I was pastoring, I wasn't divorced at the time, and I never thought that I would be. But I remember there were people who were struggling with it. They had either just been divorced, something like that. And all the Christians are all busy like pointing the finger about whether it's right or wrong. I'm like, and my problem with that was like, these people are going through the toughest thing they've ever been through in their life. They don't need someone to tell them whether it's right or wrong. Of course, they don't want to be getting divorced. What they need is love. And if we're going to be churches who are doling out the love of Christ, we need to love people through their divorces. And I'm not trying to say encourage them to get divorced. What I'm just saying is that people need love. People need love when the one modality of love that they thought they could count on is now crumbling and falling apart. People need love. That's what they need.
Yeah.
They don't need a finger pointed down their throat.
Yeah. Do you think that you'll get to a point where you can, turn around from the blackboard and just kind of give some super like irreverent but also soft answer to some, young person piss and vinegar about some supercharged topic? Just turn around from the blackboard and give this very irreverent answer to them,
but
it's also so soft that they can't argue with it.
Yeah, I don't know. And it's like, weird. It's weird how some people have a teacherly authority that transcends their need to argue for their point.
Yeah.
And he had that.
I want
in a very respectful way.
you know? Like they just deflate, like they just take all the air out
Yeah.
of all of the knowledge that puffeth up, just like take all the air out of it.
Yeah.
It's like,
Yeah.
oh, I don't feel so puffed up anymore, you know?
I have been deflated. Thank you.
Yeah.
I imagine Mitch Hedberg saying that. Thank you. I
So,
have been deflated.
so, you know, I'm trying to think about some like, I think we hit a point a little while ago about like the dismal state of the institution of marriage at this juncture in human history.
Yeah.
It's pretty dismal. Um, so you started to kind of tease a little bit with some potential, uh, you know, solutions and or adaptations.
Yeah.
So it made me think that way back in the conversation we were talking about, the moral intuitions are going to drive the person to seek out the reference from the external locus of authority, i.e. the Bible.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm thinking to myself, like, what if a potential solution right now, and I'm just saying this because it could be supported biblically because it happened, is multiple marriage partners, polygamy.
Because it's all through the Old Testament.
Well, I mean, sure, fine. If that's the reference and the justification, I'm just saying that, like, what if because of the the spiral dynamic graph that you showed and how like the variables and the possibilities of everything is getting so combinatorially explosive that it's hard to keep a lifelong marriage. It's very clearly hard to keep a lifelong marriage nowadays. It's hard for so many reasons that we can't go through, barely any of them. But it's like, what if a potential solution was multiple polygamous situations? Like, so you know what I'd like to see? I know that
they're going to start calling us Mormons. You know that, right?
Okay, well, I was going there. I was already going there. So I'd like to see what the divorce rate of Mormons is these days.
Well, so let me. It's interesting. So most Latter-day Saints practitioners either do not or do not admit to still practicing polygamy. So let me take this in a different direction, if you don't mind me redirecting here. What if you lived like? I think in America we're confused about what marriage is because marriage shows up in the Bible, but it also shows up in the government, right?
Okay.
So do we believe in marriage? So think about this from a Christian standpoint. What constitutes a marriage, right? Is it a ceremony? Is it a document signed by a preacher and witnesses?
What sanctions a marriage?
Okay.
Is that what you're... Okay.
Okay, what sanctions a marriage? Or is it the marriage certificate from the state?
Okay.
You see? Or like Ruckman said, is it flesh joining flesh?
Right.
Know ye not that he which is joined to a harlot is one flesh? I mean, that's where he gets, that kind of thing. Isaac took her into his tent and they were husband and wife. Bam, flesh joining flesh. So what constitutes a marriage in the first place? And so one question we could ask ourselves, let's imagine we live in a place, because the governmental marriage certificate does not make you married as it originally came about. It actually recognizes a marriage for the sake of interacting with the state. So if I want to claim a different tax rate, I need some kind of mechanism that the state recognizes that says you are in fact married. So we will have our own process. So if you get a marriage certificate from the state, it originally came about as a recognition of a marriage, which would happen in a church, right?
Okay.
Does that make sense? So that's the state putting their stamp of approval of, okay, you can file your taxes at the married filing jointly rate, and that's their paperwork for it, something like that. But we have somebody saying there's an echo, so I've tried to turn down some things, but anyway.
Let me turn down a little.
I'll back up. So I want to put out this little thought experiment there and ask what people think. Like me and Paula, when we got married, this is my second marriage, we went to the courthouse. Well, we didn't go to a church. Well, is it really a marriage? Are we committing fornication right now? So what if we lived in a country that did not have the word marriage? What if we lived in a country that, for the sake of filing your official documents with the government, they had something else? Maybe they call it a civil union, maybe they call it whatever, but there is no marriage. State doesn't have the word marriage. They have, let's say they have civil unions, and the contracts are for 3 years. And at the end of the 3 years, if you do not intentionally renew the contract, then you are no longer married. It's no longer binding. You're no longer a civil union. I said married, but the union is you have to renew it in order to keep it there. Yeah. And so I wonder what Christians would do if they lived in a society where those were the rules. You see what I'm saying? Because we conflate.
Like you have to register your car.
Yeah.
You have a car registration.
Register your car.
And if you don't register your car, then you don't get to drive it on the road.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have the privilege of driving it on the road.
Right. So if you don't renew your civil union contract with the state, then you can't file taxes with them, and you can't have them sign up as your next of kin or be the insurance beneficiary or whatever it is, or speak for you when you're end of life and it's time to pull the plug, whatever it is. They can't do it if you haven't renewed.
Okay.
So what the question would be, what, with our Bible in our hands, what would Christians do? Say you go to that country as a missionary, what are you telling the Christians to do?
Okay.
Or say that's the way America is.
This is a better thought experiment than the polygamy thing. Okay. Huh. Well, I think it would definitely get Christians immediately to look more deeply into what exactly they mean when they are getting married. Like, I think they'd have a more clear understanding and more of a reverence for it, probably.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that's what because there'd be more, you'd be kind of like, you'd be disambiguating the term just by cutting off that entire social influence on the notion of marriage.
Right.
I.e., taking the government, or at least allowing the government to define, not even define it. It's something completely and utterly different. Yeah,
it's a different kind of thing.
Huh. That seems kind of healthy to me.
Or what if instead of having marriage, they had kid production licenses? Like you can't have a baby unless you have a license to do so. And then there's
Yeah.
Who's on the kid production license? What names are on there?
Do you think that that's something like that is coming in the future?
I don't know. We live in a Judeo-Christianized society. I mean, a lot of people say this isn't a Christian government, and it probably isn't anymore. But in 1856, the Supreme Court thought it was a Christian nation. They declared that from the Supreme Court in 1856. So we have, the founding fathers quoted from Blackstone's Commentary on Law and the Book of Deuteronomy more than anything else. And Blackstone's Commentary on Law is based on Deuteronomy. So there was a meme on Imgur that said, your Bible is your Bible is not one of the three branches of government, you stupid Christians. And I'm like, don't you realize the three branches of government came from the Book of Deuteronomy? Moses was the executive branch, the elders were the legislative branch, and the Levites were the judicial branch. That's where it comes from, three branches of government. Anyway, But we live in such a Judeo-Christianized historically society that there's a lot of overlap and I think conflation over legalities of these kinds of concepts versus what we think the Bible says about them versus what is actually a wise thing to be doing.
Oh my gosh, yeah. So it feels like if you just kind of, just generally speaking, if I'm hearing what you're saying, if you genuinely remove an entire social institution, like the biggest social institution of government, away from this thing, it allows you to maybe understand and define and get a better, turn up the resolution on just exactly what we're up to. Like, it makes our expectations a little bit more clear because our
Right.
definitions are a little bit more clear. It already seems that way. It's like
Right. Yeah.
it almost like it gives people the space to actually think about, why am I considering marriage in the first place? You know?
So, yeah. And another thought experiment that I like to put out is let's take 20 Americans. Let's take 20 25-year-old Americans. I mean 100 125-year-old Americans, 50 women, 50 men. Put them naked on a deserted island, and you give them all amnesia. Like, they can speak English and they can function,
Yep.
but they don't remember anything about laws, rules, regulations, Bible, culture. They don't remember anything like that. But they can speak, and they're 25. They can reproduce. They're all naked on this deserted island. Society, go. What happens?
Yeah.
Like, in other words, okay, when you came back to visit them in 3 years, if any of them were still alive, what kind of authoritative structures would they have set up for themselves? How long would it take them to realize that certain actions produce babies? And maybe we should put guardrails around those actions since they produce babies. And then what would those guardrails look like if they invented them from the ground up reactionarily to what they discovered? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I like to think about what they would do. In other words, if you had to generate the wisdom of God from scratch into a codification of law, like if you had to write the Pentateuch or God's law for a certain group of people, what wisdom would you bring in to offer as guidance for how people should and should not behave?
Huh. So, not for nothing, but my mom got me this sweater for Christmas, or
Oh
this
yeah,
hoodie.
you're wearing it. That's right. You sent me that photo.
So that's actually what Plato is doing in his book, The Republic. He's just having a dialogue. He's writing out a dramatic dialogue about Socrates and a couple other people doing a thought experiment of what the state should look like, what it could look like. They're doing exactly that. They're all giving their wisdom or their thoughts on what it would look like, what an institution should look like if it wanted to produce X. And the X that Plato's characters are talking about is what a just individual would look like. So then they go, okay, well, what would a just state look like, or government look like? And that's what the entire book is. And my mom got me this sweater, which is the entire book of the Republic,
Written on a hoodie.
inscribed on. You can't see the words, but it's all 10 chapters right on this hoodie. It's actually kind of cool. So the fact that you do that in order to think through hypotheses, in order to hypothesize is very interesting, because it's almost like a spiritual exercise, to try and put a level of hypothetical constraints on a group of individuals in order to understand or anticipate what a good solution to a current problem that you're seeing might be. And, that being marriage, divorce, and remarriage in our little dialogue here. So I think I ought to do that a little bit more. I'm not very good at it doing it extemporaneously. Like, you're asking me what would it look like for 125-year-olds? What would it look like in 3 years after they, you know, had civil amnesia and
Civil amnesia. That's a great way
yeah,
to say it.
yeah. What would it look like? Like, I don't know. I don't even know how to start thinking about that.
If I ever get
Do
arrested, that's
you?
going to be my defense. I have civil amnesia. So, there's something that's popping up in the chat. A few people have said, well, a marriage needs to be God-centered. And I think that to me that comes across as platitudinal. Like, it doesn't mean anything that I can wrap my fingers around. What do you mean God-centered? Are you talking about putting Hebraic megazeus in the middle of your marriage? And how do you do that? Do you have a little doll of him? Do you see what I'm saying? And people say, well, and so they're probably thinking about a set of rules and practices and maybe agreed upon beliefs. Well, we're going to,
Yeah,
you see, because you can't grab God and put him in the middle of your marriage. You have to have something to represent God for you. And that's
yeah,
going to have to be rules, practices, and beliefs. Because that's how stage 3 Christians relate to God. If you have rules, practices, and beliefs, and that's your concept, so you're going to be praying together, you're going to be reading the Bible together, you're going to be going to church together, and then you're going to have a list of what constitutes appropriate behavior. You should say you love me and take me out on dates and not flirt with my girlfriends or stuff like that. You're gonna have and then beliefs. We have to believe certain things, right? Well, when you think about what constitutes putting God in the center of your marriage, when one person starts to grow in their concept of exactly who and what God is,
yeah,
they're going to breach those rules, practices, and beliefs
yeah,
almost inevitably. So it's like you're setting yourself up for failure. It's like you're setting yourself up to weaponize and whop somebody over the head.
yeah.
Kay the Elder says putting God first is preventing the marriage from becoming your idol. I could see that. Like, it's interesting. And that would also need to be fleshed out. Like, what do we mean by that?
Yeah, well, because if the marriage isn't your idol, isn't that in some ways inferring that God would become the idol?
But we don't have access. We don't have a concrete access to God. We have proxy access to God.
Because, I mean, you do have to have a sense of an ideal, not an idol, but an ideal marriage in order to know what expectations there are, in order to have an aim, in order to have a goal, in order to have an understanding of what should, what could, and, what ought be done. So, I don't know. Yeah, I don't know what sense that's being.
Well,
Having.
I don't know. It kind of makes me think of if we think of modal confusion, maybe another way to say this is that we don't want to be in having mode with our spouse, but we want to be in being mode with our spouse. So instead of having a wife, like I have a car and I have a house and I have interchangeable parts in my car, instead of having her as a thing that I own, I'm going to be a husband.
Right.
Maybe something like that.
Trying to think about what it would look like if you idolized a marriage, ideal.
Yeah, I think if you thought of your spouse categorically and you were proud of them like a trophy, and then you could be
Mm-hmm.
religious, not proud like a trophy wife, like, oh, I married Dolly Parton, but like proud, like, look, I'm doing it right. I'm moral. I'm still married. I'm following the
Ah,
rules. I'm virtue
yeah,
signaling.
yeah. Okay.
We're the godly people. We homeschool.
Hmm.
Guilty of all those, by the way. We raise chickens.
Everybody raises chickens where I'm here.
Yeah.
A
I
lot of
raised
people I
chickens
work
for a
with, they're
while
raising chickens. You know?
until I had to kill a few of them. I'm like, I don't think I enjoy doing that. Yeah. Prudence McFrugal says we should be in being mode in our relationship with God as well. Yeah, I totally agree with that. So there's so much. So you know what? I need to add that to my lenses. I wonder if I don't already have that in my lenses.
Oh, modal confusion.
Yeah, having and being
Okay.
mode.
Yeah, that's a good one.
I think I have it somewhere. But that's definitely. I might already have it and just forgot that I have it.
I don't see it.
So we need to make another one. Let's take this yellow boy here and be like modality. Having, being,
Yeah. Being.
having,
Have. Yeah.
having or being.
Nice.
All right. I feel like I cut you off a few minutes ago. Do you want to go back to talking
No.
about polygamy now?
No, it seems like a bad idea.
Oh, I'm just imagining the comments that would come from people. You guys are Mormons now. Just to think through it. There are tribes, though. This is interesting to me that the whole progress of how anthropologists tell us societies develop, and we still have tribes to this day that are matriarchal, and
Mm-hmm.
the adults are not necessarily monogamous with individual partners, and when they have kids, it's the kids of the tribe. It's not like a 1-for-1 mom and dad set to each kid. It's kids of the tribe, and the tribe raises the kid. I'm not saying that that's how things should be done. I'm just saying that is
Oh no.
a way
Yeah.
that people do things, that some people do things. And then you have a hunter-gatherer situation, then the invention of the plow. The invention of the plow creates a caloric surplus, and the caloric surplus needs to be stored somewhere, and you need to secure the land so that you can keep generating the caloric surplus. And the plow is not so good for pregnant women because they lose their babies when they do this, so it needs to be operated by men. So then you become more patriarchal. The hunter-gatherer tribal societies start to lose their matriarchal goddesses, and the gods start to become more masculine, and they go into more patriarchal society. And then you have to have paternal certainty. So because the land has to be inherited by somebody. And so instead of having the tribe having a bunch of babies, and we're not sure who everybody's parents are, maybe just the mothers, now we move into a situation where caloric surplus is tied to the land, needs to be inherited, is tied to inheritance rights, so I need paternal certainty. So the idea that the idea that I have my woman and she's mine and all those kids are mine, anthropologists think kind of developed out of this shift in technology toward agriculture.
Interesting.
Which is an interesting thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's different ways to do things, different ways to skin the cat. What do you think? I mean, we've been doing this we got like 9 minutes to 8 here, 9 minutes to 9 where you are. Are we leaving things unsaid right now? Do we need to look at some comments?
Yeah, I think so.
The overlap between idolatry and adultery is huge. One violates our relationship with him. The other violates our with him in marriage. You know, I have the cure for adultery. Somebody asked earlier if your spouse commits adultery and you forgive them and stay married, what's the difference between showing mercy and being a fool? And I have the solution to that, but I'm definitely not going to say it online.
You can tell me later.
I'll tell you later. But I know how to guarantee adultery will never happen again. At least not with that person. And it does not involve any violence or any coercion or anything like that. Looking through some of these, the weightier provisions of the law, justice, mercy, and faithfulness. Governmental authority. While not defining biblical marriage, we are told to honor the governmental authority. So that's interesting there. We're told to honor. So what if you're in a Braveheart situation and the lord of the land, after you get married, decides that he has first rights to the bride because that's the law of the land? Do we acquiesce to that governmental authority? Which apparently was a thing historically.
That's kind of like the opposite of what your hypothetical suggestion was to kind of remove state definitions and, this is the opposite. It's actually allow the state to kind of define and regulate the procedures and ethics of what constitutes a marriage.
Yeah, and then they go too far the other way.
Yeah, right. So it's another way to think about it, I guess.
I don't know what the current situation is, but at least for a while, when all the stuff about gay marriage came out, all the different states did their different things, and Alabama, I think, just decided to stop issuing marriage certificates
altogether.
They just stopped issuing marriage certificates, and so I think if you get a marriage from your church or something, you still go file it with the state, but the state never issued one. Something like that. I'm not sure exactly how that works. I wasn't living there at the time, but I think that's still the case. And then I knew a church in New Orleans who they anticipated, I think his name was Brother Adams. They anticipated the whole gay marriage thing coming down, and so they had a policy for years and years. They don't do marriages at all. So they can't be accused of not playing the game or being bigots or whatever. They just don't do marriage. And this also kind of, this might be jumping down this might be the wrong rabbit trail for this, but I was talking with somebody online, and a lot of people like to throw Andy Stanley under the bus because it sounds to me like Andy Stanley is trying to find a way to minister to gay people. Right?
Okay.
And well, of course, all the people in the traditional church settings, like I'm in the Southern Baptist discussion group, they just all think he's some kind of wicked heretic and false teacher for even trying. Because, of course, if you try that in a church setting, everyone's going to say you're doing it wrong and you're crossing some kind of boundary. And my thinking on this is that maybe our institutional boundaries, if they're stopping us from finding a way to minister to everybody, maybe there's something wrong with them or something not biblical about them, like the Ephesians 4:16 model. So like you or me, you've been here, we go play volleyball and stuff. You've been to the volleyball complexes. If I go to play volleyball and I have a friend that's an atheist or they're gay or something like that, I have no problems influencing that person in a one-on-one scenario to try to help them find the next rung on their ladder of transformation. Nobody bats an eye because it's just me and them. But if I'm a pastor and there's an institution tied to it and I'm trying to find a place to plug them into the church institution so that they can get ministered to, now, because I'm trying to help people transform into the better version of themselves, now I'm crossing lines and boundaries.
Yeah, you bring the whole arena with you, actually. It's
Yeah.
like the whole arena changes, but that's because you bring the whole arena with you instead of actually being like fluid as an agent into different arenas that
Yes.
you find yourself with. You're kind of beholden, and actually you're kind of a slave to the
Yeah.
to that
You are.
arena.
You're
It's
limited
with
on.
you wherever
All it
you
does is
go.
limit you.
And that's actually, you know what? That's actually profane. That's something to add to our profanity uh concept, where it's profanity is not something that's just a language thing. It's also the arenas that you bring with you into other super arenas, I guess you would call it,
Oh
you
wow.
know? So I feel like a
So
pastor, or like a Catholic priest does that um very obviously, where they bring the whole arena of the Catholic Church with them wherever they go. So they get treated like
ah.
a Catholic priest, whether they're in the airport or at the supermarket or in their church building, rather than just an individual uh, at the volleyball court. So that's profanity. It's profane to bring, it's profane to go to a church, into a Catholic church building, in the wrong clothes. So it's profane to bring Catholic church building arena with you to the volleyball court. It's a misapprehension.
So profane in this context to be bringing one arena inappropriately into another.
Yeah, 100%. And I know that you've felt that before, like that you bring the arena as baggage with you, and it limits your agency within the present tense arena.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So then the question would be, how do we update the arena of the quote unquote church? I mean, there's lots of. I think we should go to the Ephesians 4:16 edification model anyway, because that would actually clear up. Everyone's arguing over women should be pastors right now. Well, in the Ephesians 4:16 edification model, you don't have one person doing broadcast modality anyway. You have
Yeah.
facilitators of peer-to-peer edification model. It's a different thing. And so just if the church were to grow into what it should be, some of the things we argue about wouldn't be things to argue about. They just wouldn't be.
Okay. So okay. So let's take the women as pastors example as a, remember, the the external locus of authority, the Bible, is setting up the parameters and the rules of the game. And it
Yep.
sounds like in the realm of when people ask you, hey, can women be pastors? You've properly diagnosed that the question is bunk. You're asking the wrong question. It doesn't matter whether women should be pastors or can be pastors or should be pastors. It should be a whole different modality to begin with.
Right. Right.
So you've got that. You've done that work.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I'm going to try and think about how that applies in the marriage thing,
Mm-hmm. Mm.
because it's like maybe we're asking the wrong questions to
Yes.
begin with.
That's what I think is the case. And I don't know what the
Yeah.
right questions are, but yes,
But
I
you
do
have
have
the
an
right
inkling that we're asking
answer.
the wrong ones.
But you at least have a practiced and tried solution to the women should be pastors thing through the Ephesians 4 edification model. Like you have a
Mm-hmm.
solution that's, um that's, in trial, and I'm saying
Mm-hmm.
it's being tested and seeing how it does. Where with the marriage thing, it's like, okay, fine, we're asking the wrong question, but what are some potential solutions,
Yeah. So with a church, you have a cluster of people who are witnessing what's happening there from various different perspectives. But for each particular marriage, there's two main participants, especially when it comes to the privacy of the own home. So I don't know. I think there's a lot of subjectivity and unknowns as far as what's going on, because we could talk about marriage in general, but really participatorily, I really only know about mine.
Yeah, me too.
and the one that
Yeah.
what I know about other people's marriage is really boils down to what they're willing to show me. When we have
Yeah.
social events, when we have game night or go play volleyball or whatever we do.
Hmm.
So I don't know what's happening in all the other marriages. Whereas I do
So,
know what's happening in, say, 250 churches.
hmm. So the only maxim I can draw from that is very limited, and it's be careful who you share your marriage with.
Yeah.
You know, that's like the only thing I can come up with. As a potential solution to the marriage, divorce, remarriage issue. Whenever it's just so that's my chalkboard turnaround, and like, oh, what do you think about marriage, divorce, remarriage in the church? Be careful who you share your marriage with.
Careful who you share your marriage with. Yeah.
You know,
Do you mean in partner selection or in who you present its internal workings to, or
geez,
both?
I guess I'm not going to limit it to either.
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't even think of the partner selection. Wow. Yeah, so now it's like a double entendre.
Yeah. But yeah, I do think that getting the motivation aspect, because back to the root causes, why are people getting divorced? I think is probably tied to why are we getting married in the first place?
Mm-hmm.
And
Okay.
if we clarify why we're getting married in the first place, then we might be able to put some boundaries on who we should marry or when we should marry them in order to accomplish that why.
Okay. Because I don't know if this gives any insight into that, but I don't feel like right now, and I don't think in the foreseeable future that I have any motivation to remarry.
Right.
Like I've actually been kind of, I would say, uh laden with the feelings I've had about, like, I kind of feel like I don't I don't even want to entertain thoughts like that. It just seems too uh laborious, and
Or
also
something like, go ahead. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
no, I needed a little bit of.
Something like who does future Nick need to be? And when I add up
Yeah.
all the things that take current Nick to be that, marriage doesn't show up on the list maybe. At least not
Yeah,
right now.
so
Something like that.
so I have been having thoughts over the past year and a half, almost 2 years that I've been divorced, where it's like I kind of feel like the things I'm having to wrestle with is the possibility that I have, like, it's becoming of me to be my be by myself, if
Hmm.
that makes sense. It's like, what if that's, I'm not thinking fatalistically or deterministically. It's not like, oh, this is what I'm supposed to do in the end, blah 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 blah. That's not how I'm thinking. But I'm trying to look into the future and see what's being presented to me now as an opportunity for me to take the best care of my future self.
Mm-hmm.
Like, what's the wisest choice right now in
Mm-hmm.
in on behalf of my future self? And it's like the question that I have to wrestle with, or at least that I feel like is most heavy,
Mm-hmm.
is, well, are you prepared to be by yourself? To not be married, not have
Mm-hmm.
a family with kids and all of that stuff,
Mm-hmm.
because my parents are still married, you know what
Mm-hmm.
I'm saying? And they're, um I wouldn't say I don't know if I'd say happily married, but they're still married and they're not going to get divorced. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
You know, it's just not in the cards for them. So the patterns that I have around me are that you work through things, you go through difficult times, and it's like that didn't work for me. Or it's sorry, it's not that it didn't work. It that's not what happened. And so it forces me to kind of wrestle with the possibility that that's what I'm being called to do, you know, and that I don't like that. It's very uncomfortable for me because my whole life I've definitely had more happy and like sunshine and rainbow thoughts about, oh, well, I'm going to have a family and, you know, have kids and do this, that, and the other thing. And it's like, well, I'm really having to dig deep and consider, is this what you know, is this what it's supposed to be? You know, is this what ought be, basically? You know, and it makes me feel like, well, that also can't be an excuse for me to not build up the agency and to take the responsibility that comes along with like a wife and kids and stuff like that too. So it's like, well, what if I'm just being lazy, you know? You know?
Or overworked.
Yeah, or overworked maybe. Probably overworked. Yeah. So I don't know. It's hard. It's very difficult for me right now. I'm very much still in the haze in regard to this subject. I don't know if you could tell through the through the discussion, but I'm definitely not in a mountain peak viewpoint. You know what I'm saying?
So I'll tell you this, like, I don't. Certain components you just may never get over. Like, I feel like I've made a lot of progress and rediscovered myself after my divorce because I had really given myself over to somebody who was essentially an identity vampire, and re-becoming myself. I feel like I'm better, I'm happier, I'm more whole. But when I'm scrolling through my email inboxes and I have to go click on that one to see if there's any updates on the kids or whatever, like that whole fog of incapacity and not knowing and anxiety just all comes back. Even this, you know, even what, almost 6 years later.
Wow. That's really graphic. Yeah.
Yeah, it's terrible. It's like this horribleness, like my identity slips away from me again just at seeing that email inbox. Not even before I even open it.
It's like that feeling when you get like a bill in the mail and you're like, I don't want to open this.
Yeah, it's one thing, but like when you spend, you know, almost 2 decades losing who you are and trying to be something that you're not in order to maintain something that never should have been.
Oh my gosh.
All that comes back.
Wow.
In surprising ways. Strange. What do you say we take a break for a while and come back and do this again sometime? We'll get some feedback from some people, see what people think.
Yeah, I'm a little cooked. We had a big nor'easter snowstorm come through this weekend, so.
Oh yeah, weather's bad here. I can't imagine what it's like that far north.
Yeah, it wasn't horrible, but you know, a lot of working hours clearing snow and stuff. So.
Yeah. All right.
So, we gotta talk. You gotta tell me about your antidote to adultery.
Yeah.
Behind the scenes.
Yeah, I will tell you about that.
And then we have surprises in early February.
Yes, indeed. I'm looking forward to all that.
Yeah, me too, man.
All right, man. Hey, I appreciate you being my interlocutor, impromptu, with no prep. I appreciate it.
My pleasure, man. I'll talk to you a little later.
All right, looking forward to doing this again soon.
See ya.
All right, so that was it. Those of you who are watching, if you got any comments, feel free to make the comments. If there's anything you thought we missed or should have said, or anything that made you think, send me some feedback. Let me know. Put it in the comments of YouTube. Shoot me an email, something like that. This whole session here was prompted by an email that I got recently as well. I get a lot of these on this topic, but this one kind of pushed me over the edge, and I'm like, I need to think through this. So I'd appreciate any feedback that you might have. If you like what you get on this channel, I ask you to support the channel. The details are in the description below. Thanks for watching. May the Lord bless you, and good evening.